Hi everyone, and welcome back to The Word at Work. Thank you so much for joining us again. Today we are continuing in our series with emotions in the Christian life. And in the studio, our guest today is Sean Savides. Sean, it's so good to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Scotty, thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Just for everyone watching out there, tell us just a little bit about yourself, where you serve, what your ministry is.
Cool. I work at Kris Church in Somerset West. Kirsty, myself, and our 3 kids moved out there about 18 months ago. I help the rector with everything that he needs helping with. It's training some of our young curates, it's preaching, and pastoral care. I do a lot of the pastoral care and counselling at Kris Church.
Fantastic. Well, today we're talking about anger. Okay. And that's pretty accessible because I think it's something that probably all of us struggle with from time to time. So maybe we can kick off by getting you to tell us, what is anger? What is the emotion that we're talking about when we refer to anger?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. In some ways it's pretty obvious. Like as you say, everyone experiences anger. In some ways it's a little bit nebulous to come up with a good definition. Having indignation towards something, being upset with something, maybe something wrong or harsh that you're against, or you feel is unfair. But I think what's interesting, in particular looking at the Bible, is anger is both a good and a bad thing. There's very clearly good and righteous anger, and God is the epitome of that. There's also bad and evil anger, and I guess Satan is the epitome of that. And so I think throughout the pages of the Bible, you'll find righteous and good anger and bad anger. I think sometimes we think that our anger is righteous anger. Out of 100, maybe 1% I think is really righteous anger. But because we are made in God's image, we can image that good righteous anger and should. But I think because we are fallen and broken, we tend to not.
Yeah.
So anger is typically a negative thing.
Right.
Most of the time. And
then if we're thinking about where does it come from, because sometimes anger really sneaks up on us, would be the experience of many people. If we're thinking about like a fit of rage, or we snap or something like that, and often it takes us so by surprise, we're not that good always at self-assessing what just happened. So now that we've got a bit of distance and we can talk about it objectively, where does anger come from? What's its cause?
So that's also interesting, because I think the world tells us, and we like to think, that anger is this thing out there that comes in, and it's this nebulous extra thing. It's this other thing. I don't think that's what the Bible teaches. I think anger is who we are. Anger is in us. Anger is part of us. I think because we are fallen and sinful, anger is there. It's in us, in our fallen nature. There's a lovely illustration that I've heard Paul Tripp and others use. Is they'll say, anger isn't neutral. Anger isn't just this kind of, it comes in and you get it out kind of thing. Anger is part of it. And he says the reason is because people will say something makes me angry. She made me angry, or the classic one is the traffic makes me angry. And I feel that sometimes too. But the truth is, the person sitting in the car next to you who's appreciating the 10 minutes of extra time before they have to go to a hard meeting or to finish their lipstick or something, is actually so anger isn't caused by the traffic per se. The traffic is the occasion that maybe brings the anger that's already stored inside of you.
So there can be plenty of triggers, but they're not causes. That's in that sense. So the same circumstance or situation can create 2 very different outcomes in 2 very different sets of people, right?
Absolutely.
And that's because people are dealing with it at a heart level, in a different way.
Yeah, and that's why I like to think about it like that. That anger's in there. It's in there. It was from the beginning when Adam was angry with Eve and blamed her. Cain killed Abel. His jealousy turned into anger, and he killed him. And throughout the pages of Scripture, you see that anger is part of who we are in our fallen human nature.
And it's funny, isn't it? Just saying that now makes me remember Jesus' words where he says, it's not what goes into you that makes you unclean, but what comes up out of your heart that makes you unclean. Yeah. So it's not the external experience that makes us angry, but rather comes up out of us.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Now, tell us, if we're thinking about anger, let's pivot for a moment and think about the opposite of anger. So if we don't want to be angry, and if the Bible encourages us not to sin in our anger, then what should we be aiming for which is different to that?
So that's an interesting one, because I think there's a sense in which we are striving to have righteous anger the way God has anger. But I think more of what you're getting at is we're looking for attributes of God that are different to anger. And so if you think about what anger is, and when you're feeling anger, I think here we're searching for mercy, showing people like kindness and a mercy. I think there's acting in grace, not repaying people for what we think they should be repaid for, but actually giving them the opposite of what we think they really deserve. Tenderness, gentleness, and patience. I think anger tends to flare up quickly. I think there's something to be said for aiming towards patience, time, just to reflect and think before jumping in, before responding or reacting. So those are some of the things, and it's interesting. Those are attributes of God. Those are characteristics we see in God, the characteristics we see in Jesus himself.
That's really helpful, but it just flagged in my mind now there's something even more fundamental to that as well, which is there is an alternative to anger. I mean, you've just given us a great spectrum of what those things could include, but that's actually probably worth acknowledging too in addressing that question, is that anger isn't necessarily inevitable. We can choose to respond to things in different ways.
Definitely, and I think, as Christians, because our whole life is a journey of change, a journey of becoming more like Jesus and putting to death sins and putting on attributes and righteousness and good things. We're in the process of change, and that's, I guess, one of the reasons we're having these conversations is thinking, for us as Christians, what are we aiming towards? And for me, the thing I often think about here is, and I might be a little bit off here, but change begins often just up here. Changing, Romans 12, 1 and 2, be renewed by your mind being renewed, and then your behaviors follow. And so for me, it's appreciating, understanding, accepting what anger is, then changing my desires to be more in line with the desires that God wants. Being angry is not good for my relationships. Being angry is not good for me personally. It's not good for what anger does eating up inside of me. And so changing my thinking to therefore change my desires, my heart, my feelings, then begins to lead to a change in behavior. Choosing the other options instead of anger.
Sure.
As you said.
And look, even from kids, we're told if you get angry, stop and count to 10, or take deep breaths, or some little approach like that. And there's value in that, obviously. However, there's probably a difference between that and what you were just saying. There's a difference between just managing the triggers, which of course won't address the heart issue, and actually looking at much more holistically, which is the picture the Bible gives us, and being able to understand the desires of your heart when they're sinful, and to be able to manage the understanding of your mind to lead you somewhere different.
That's super hard. I mean, so there definitely would be techniques that, step away, count to 10, 5 deep breaths, and there'd be something good in all those things. I really believe that. The problem with those things is they tend to help in the moment, but I don't think they bring lasting change. So when someone's got a real, all of us have anger issues or anger problem, or angry at times, but when somebody really has deep-seated anger and vitriol and that really is eating them up, I think those techniques can be helpful to an extent, but what you're really searching for is deep heart change that only the gospel brings. That as you meditate on the fact that Jesus has actually died in your place, that Jesus has actually paid for your sin, that Jesus... So even if somebody sins against you, which is going to happen all the time, we're all sufferers as well as sinners, you can, because of the gospel, go, hang on a second, I don't have to respond in that way. I change my thinking about it, it changes my motives, my motivation, my heart begins to change as my mind gets clearer on that, and then inevitably my behaviors start to change. So that heart change is lasting change. That's real change. That's the Holy Spirit at work changing us and making us more like Jesus. And that's the objective. Those other things can be helpful, sure, But I think that's what we as Christians are really aiming for.
So you've taken us towards the gospel and the role that plays in this journey of sanctification. So let's take the opportunity now to think of Jesus himself and anger, and what do we learn from Jesus and see in his words, his life, his witness, even his death, that might be helpful for us here.
Great. So I think the first thing is, Jesus did get angry. Jesus was angry when he was in the temple and they were turning it into a den of robbers, and his father's house was desecrated, and he flipped the tables and made the whip and chased the animals out. So Jesus got angry. Now that was righteous anger. Jesus, the man without sin, displayed righteous anger there. So we see that Jesus was angry. I think the second thing is that Jesus will be the judge who will come again, and there will be a day of judgment, and there will be wrath on that day, and God is a God who has righteous anger against our sin, against our rebellion, against our wickedness, and Jesus will be the judge, but it will come again. But the joy, it's why we're Christians, is because actually Jesus died on the cross. And Jesus faced God's anger. When I think about anger, one of the things that really helps me is to go, Jesus actually faced the wrath of God. He took God's anger upon himself so that we can be redeemed and restored and forgiven, and so that we can be changed and become more like him as we put our faith and our trust in him, as we grow as Christians, as we sanctification is the word the Bible would use, as we grow to be like him. So he took our anger so that we don't have to ultimately on that day face the wrath of God. And that gives me hope now that change is happening, and actually I don't have to be the angry person that I have been. Now these are small steps, it's progressive sanctification, it takes time, but in my moment of getting angry with my kids for leaving Lego on the floor again, I can pause, I can breathe, I can go, Jesus is the Lord reigning in heaven, he has died for me.
And Jesus died for this moment.
He died for this moment.
So that I won't sin in my anger.
That's it.
That's
it. Because, and I'm glad you referenced that first, because that's the problem.
Yeah.
In your anger, do not sin. The problem is, in my anger, I sin 99 times out of 100.
And it's probably worth saying, is that there are plenty of things in this world that are worth getting angry about. There's a lot of injustice.
Absolutely.
I mean, the thing just speaking personally, whenever I watch a news article or if it's in a movie, I can't stomach the movie, is where there's human trafficking, child trafficking, prostitution. I can't bear it. I can't carry that burden. And I get really angry. When I throw things at the TV, I probably sin in my anger, but the initial reaction of going, no, this is wrong, this is offensive, this is so bad. There's something right in that.
Absolutely.
So again, just to nuance that we can't. Jesus doesn't call us to live through life skating over the top of it and feeling like vanilla beige about everything that happens. We're to feel objection to objectionable things.
That's right. I mean, emotions is something he gave us. We are in that sense, we're made in his image in the fact that we have emotions, and Jesus displayed those emotions. But you're right, it's what we do with it, and I think it's good and right to feel injustice at things that are wrong, and it's good and right to feel angry towards things that are against God, and what you then do with it is the important follow-on.
As we start to wrap up, let's maybe just pivot and talk about some practical steps, some actionable things that all of us in our everyday life might be able to refer to or be mindful of, so that we can keep making those steps towards godliness.
So the first thing that I think is asking yourself the right questions. So in that moment, I'm thinking particularly people that really struggle with anger, or people perhaps watching this that are thinking, I want to make some progress in this area. I've got a little list of questions here that I think are questions worth asking yourself. So I've got my paper here, I can't remember them all offhand, but the first few come in little couplets. So, do I get angry at the right things? And do I express my anger in the right way? So to your thing about, am I getting angry at the right things? Am I expressing it correctly, appropriately, in a godly kind of way? Personal questions. How long does my anger last? And how controlled is my anger? Again, sitting there feeling indignation is good and right and appropriate. If I'm still 5 days later smarting, I can't now concentrate, I'm kicking the cat every time I walk past him, then you're thinking, hang on, got to talk to someone here. 2 more questions. What lies behind my anger? What is really the thing that's going on in here? When I'm angry about the Lego that I just stood on again, the truth is, yes, I can say that it's about the tidiness of our home. It's actually, no, it's the inconvenience it's been to me to come home from work and hurt my foot again on the piece of Lego. It's a silly illustration, but it's what's going on in here that's making me angry. On a more serious note, angry with a spouse for something, ask yourself the question, what's going on in here as well? And then linked with that is what is the effect of my anger? What are the consequences? What is the knock-on effect here? And I see it in my own marriage and relationships where when I'm angry and sulking, because anger can be out there and screaming and shouting, anger can be ignoring and bitterness and grumpiness. Silence and silent treatment is just as much. What are the consequences of that? And that's it helps me think through, is this anger good and righteous, or is it not? And invariably it's not. Those 2 little couplets. Then 4 things that just take it to a little bit more of a deeper spiritual level. What is true and false about the situation? I'm really angry because of something Kirsty said to me, but did she really say that, and did she really mean it like that? What's the truth here? Linked with that is then how do I take that to God and ask Him for help? How do I pause, walk away, and go, Lord, actually, it's me again. I need you to help me. And how can I then respond differently this time and bring God glory rather than thuggish behavior that normally comes out of me when I'm angry? And finally, what good fruit could come out of that change? If I treat even a person who sinned against me differently, what good fruit, pleasing fruit could come out of that? And for me, I find that those things, it's applicable for anger. I guess it's like helpful for most sinful struggles we have. Asking those questions, it pulls me back, it takes me off the edge, and it makes me just reflect and think hard, and you do that prayerfully. So then linked to those questions, just a few real practical things really quick. One is talk to someone about it, talk to a friend, just have a friend, you say, look, I'm really struggling with anger at the moment. I get angry in these situations, this is what I tend to do, this is where I tend to go with it, and a friend could just, a friend, a counselor, a pastor could really walk a road with you there. Talk to God about it. Take it to Him in prayer. Say, Lord, it's me again, and I'm sorry. I'm back there again. I got angry for something that I really shouldn't have. I behaved really badly. Lord, please forgive me. And I guess that's sort of looking at it in the vertical relationship. Start there, and then I would go to the horizontal and go. Maybe there are people you've got to say sorry to as well. Maybe you've got to go back to your spouse and say, I'm sorry that I lost my temper and I was really angry, and please will you forgive me too.
And one of the places I've seen that work out in my life is with my kids. Sometimes you think, I can understand apologising to a spouse, but I don't apologise to my kids because they're my kids, right? But I've realised that when I've let my anger get the better of me and sinned in that anger, I actually need to demonstrate to my kids that all Christians, make amends on the horizontal. Absolutely. Even with them, because how am I going to expect them to learn that if I don't model that? That's
exactly. I mean, Kirsty and I try and even sometimes help each other with that. I mean, she's really good at saying to me, look, you actually lost your temper there. Yeah. You need to go back. And I'm like, I don't go. Why do I go back? And she's right. Yeah. And it does a few things. One is it restores the relationship and it brings that good fruit. But the second thing it does is it models for them. It models for them that, I was angry and quick anecdotal story. We had an incident recently where I got super angry. I was angry about something already, and then my middle son told me just to calm down, chill out, and that was just like red rag bull. And I really I was like, what do you speak? But it was interesting. I found him in his bedroom after I sent him away and threatened to kill him. And I went and found him and I said, look, I'm really sorry that I was angry with you like that, and I was out of line. And the tender moment it brought for us to hug, for him to say sorry, was really beautiful. And actually, it's how God is so good to us, where He can use these hard and difficult, messy things and the sin in our lives to bring good fruit from those situations. That's great.
Sean, it's been great having you. Thank you for your wisdom and your insight on that. And and you've put it to the front of my mind again as well. So my kids and wife will be happy tonight that we've had this conversation. Folks, thanks so much for joining us again, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. So take care and God bless.